Picture this. You walk into your office on a Monday morning, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another week of deadlines and database queries. But instead of your familiar workspace, you find some kid half your age sitting at your desk, using your computer, drinking from your favorite mug. He looks up with a smile that screams privilege and says the words that will haunt you for months. "Oh hey, don't worry. I'll take good care of your systems." That kid? The CEO's nephew. Your replacement. What he didn't know was that I'd built those systems like a fortress, and I was the only one who held the keys to the kingdom. This is the story of how corporate nepotism tried to erase me, and how I used their own arrogance to reclaim everything they thought they'd stolen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Chen, and I used to believe that hard work and talent were enough. I was 28, a senior database administrator at TechFlow Solutions in Austin, Texas, and I genuinely thought I'd found my place in the world. For 3 years, I'd been the person everyone called when the servers went down, when client data needed rescuing, when the impossible needed to become possible. I'd built our entire database infrastructure from the ground up, working nights and weekends, turning a chaotic mess of spreadsheets and outdated systems into something beautiful, efficient, and powerful. That Monday morning started like any other. I parked my Honda Civic in the same spot I'd claimed since my promotion 2 years earlier, grabbed my laptop bag and my oversized coffee, and took the elevator to the 15th floor. The familiar hum of the server room next door always greeted me first, like a technological lullaby that told me I was home. TechFlow's Austin headquarters buzzed with the energy of a company on the rise, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the downtown skyline, open-concept workspaces designed to foster collaboration and innovation. I'd earned my spot here. Started as a junior analyst straight out of college, worked my way up through sheer determination and an almost obsessive attention to detail. While other developers focused on flashy front-end work, I fell in love with the backbone of it all. The databases that made everything else possible. I spoke SQL like a second language, could debug complex queries in my sleep, and had a reputation for building systems so robust they practically ran themselves. Walking toward my corner office that morning, I noticed something felt different. The usual morning chatter seemed muted, and several colleagues looked away when I smiled at them. Amanda Foster, my assistant for the past year, was conspicuously absent from her desk. I shrugged it off, figuring she was running late or grabbing coffee from the lobby cafe. Then I reached my office door. The nameplate still read, Sarah Chen, Senior Database Administrator. But underneath it, someone had stuck a yellow post-it note, Tyler Morrison, Database Manager. I stared at it for a moment, certain it was some kind of mistake or joke. Maybe Amanda was pulling a prank, or someone had gotten confused about meeting room assignments. I pushed open the door and felt the world tilt sideways. Someone else was sitting at my desk. Not just any someone, but a young man who couldn't have been older than 23, all confident posture and expensive haircut. He was leaning back, in my ergonomic chair, the one I'd fought procurement for 3 months to get approved, his feet casually propped up on my desk. My 3 monitors displayed code I recognized instantly, database architecture I'd spent 2 years perfecting, optimization algorithms that had taken me months to develop. But what really hit me like a punch to the gut was seeing him drinking from my coffee mug. The ceramic one with Database Queen printed in bold letters, a Christmas gift from my team last year. It sat there in his hands like he owned it, like he'd always owned it. Tyler Morrison looked up when I entered, and his smile was the kind of casual, entitled expression that belonged to someone who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. "Oh, hey, Sarah," he said, like we were old friends catching up. "Uncle James said you'd be helping me transition into the role." I stood there in the doorway, laptop bag still slung over my shoulder, car keys dangling from my fingers, trying to process what I was seeing. The familiar scent of my office, usually comforting with its mix of coffee and the faint ozone smell from the nearby servers, now felt foreign and wrong. Transition into what role exactly? I managed to ask, proud that my voice came out steady, despite the chaos in my head. That's when Kevin Walsh appeared, like he'd been lurking in the hallway waiting for this exact moment. Kevin ran human resources with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine and the warmth of a corporate manual. He carried his ever-present clipboard and wore the kind of practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Sarah, we discussed this in the email," he said, his tone suggesting I was being deliberately difficult. "The restructuring? You're being moved to a junior analyst position. Fresh perspectives, you know. New blood, innovative approaches." I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. "What email?" Kevin's smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. "The departmental reorganization notice. Sent Friday afternoon. IT issues? Happens all the time." He gestured vaguely toward Tyler, who was now spinning lazily in my chair like he was testing it out. "Tyler here is James Morrison's nephew. Recent graduate from UT, computer science degree, very impressive credentials." "I never got an email," I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I realized how naive they sounded. Of course, I hadn't gotten an email. This wasn't about communication failures or IT glitches. This was about something much more deliberate. Tyler swiveled to face me fully, and I noticed he was wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Don't worry," he said with the kind of casual arrogance that made my teeth clench. "I'll take good care of your systems. Uncle James has been telling me all about the incredible work you've done here. Really impressive stuff for someone without formal training." The insult hit exactly as intended. I had formal training, plenty of it, plus years of real-world experience that no college course could provide. But Tyler Morrison didn't need to know my qualifications because Tyler Morrison didn't care about qualifications. He cared about last names and family connections and the kind of privilege that opens doors without knocking. Kevin was still talking. Something about how my new workspace would be just as productive and how this was really an opportunity for professional growth. I tuned him out, watching instead as Tyler casually clicked through my development environment, scrolling past months of work like he was browsing social media. "Your new desk is over there," Kevin said, pointing toward the far corner of the office. I followed his gesture and felt my heart sink. A standard cubicle near the copy machine, the kind of workspace reserved for interns and entry-level employees. No windows, no privacy, no direct access to the server room. It was the corporate, equivalent of being sent to sit at the kids' table. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The entire office had gone quiet. 30 pairs of eyes watched this corporate theater play out, some curious, some sympathetic, most just grateful it wasn't happening to them. I could see Amanda hovering near the break room, finally returned, from wherever she'd been hiding, her face a mask of guilt and discomfort. "How long have you known?" I asked her directly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Amanda's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They said it was confidential until today. I couldn't say anything." "How long?" 2 weeks. Tyler's been shadowing the senior staff, learning the systems." She paused, glancing nervously at Kevin before continuing. "He's been asking a lot of questions about your database architecture." That's when the full scope of this betrayal hit me. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a hasty decision made over the weekend. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to launch our new client portal, staying late to optimize performance and debug integration issues, they'd been planning my replacement. Tyler had been here for 2 weeks, learning my job, preparing to take over my life's work. I thought about all the times Kevin had complimented my dedication, all the meetings where James Morrison had praised my innovation and reliability. Thought about the performance review 3 months ago where I'd been told I was exceeding expectations and essential to the company's future growth. Apparently, essential meant replaceable by someone whose only qualification was sharing DNA with the CEO. Tyler's voice cut through my thoughts. "Sarah?" he called from my desk, using the tone you'd use with a helpful intern. "Could you walk me through the primary database passwords? Uncle James said you'd get me up to speed on the security protocols." The entire office held its breath. This was the moment of truth, the test of whether I'd roll over and accept this humiliation or fight back. Tyler sat there expectantly, his hand poised over my keyboard, waiting for me to hand over the keys to everything I'd built. I looked around the room at my colleagues, people I'd worked beside for years, people I'd helped when their projects were failing, people I'd covered for when they needed flexibility. Most of them were staring at their screens now, pretending to be absorbed in work, unwilling to meet my eyes. Then I looked at Tyler Morrison, 23 years old and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself, never having to earn respect, never having to wonder if your gender or your last name is working against you. He honestly expected me to train my own replacement, to smile and nod and make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone involved. I made a decision that would change everything. I didn't give him the passwords. Instead, I walked to my old desk and opened the bottom drawer, the one that locked and only I had the key to. Inside were my personal items. The small, succulent plant I'd nursed back to health over 2 years. The framed photo of my dog Max that always made me smile during stressful days. And most importantly, the encrypted backup drive I always kept, as insurance against system failures. Tyler watched me curiously as I gathered these things, probably wondering why I wasn't immediately complying with his request. Kevin looked nervous, like this wasn't going according to the script he'd prepared. "The passwords," Tyler repeated, a slight edge creeping into his voice. "I need administrative access to begin the transition." I stood up, holding my box of personal items, and looked him directly in the eyes. "You'll figure it out," I said, simply. Then I walked out. Not dramatically, not with shouting or slam doors or the kind of scene that would give them ammunition to paint me as emotional or unstable. I just walked out, my heels clicking steadily across the polished concrete, floors, past the shocked faces of my former colleagues, past the motivational posters about teamwork and innovation, past the reception desk where the company mission statement was displayed in elegant corporate fonts. The elevator ride down felt like the longest 15 seconds of my life. Through the glass walls, I could see Tyler already frantically clicking. Around my computer, probably trying to guess passwords or find some way into the systems. Good luck with that, I thought. I'd built those databases with security protocols that would make Fort Knox jealous. In the parking garage, I sat in my Honda Civic with the engine off, watching people walk into the building where I'd spent the last 3 years of my life. TechFlow Solutions had been more than just a job to me. It had been a place where I could build something meaningful, where my skills mattered, where I thought I'd found my professional home. I pulled out my phone and tried logging into the company system using my credentials. Access denied. The message appeared instantly, no hesitation, no temporary glitch. They'd been thorough, I'd give them that. My building badge, my network access, my email account, probably even my parking space, all revoked while I was standing in my former office wondering what had hit me. But they'd made one crucial mistake in their efficiency. In their rush to lock me out of everything. They'd forgotten that the database systems I'd built were more complex than Tyler Morrison's computer science degree had prepared him for. They'd forgotten that I didn't just work with those systems. I'd created them. From scratch, every table, every relationship, every security protocol. As I started my car and pulled out of the parking garage for what I thought would be the last time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just anger or hurt or professional betrayal, though all of those emotions were certainly there. What I felt was a cold, calculating certainty that this story was far from over. Tyler Morrison might have my chair, my office, and my coffee mug, but he didn't have my knowledge, my experience, or my intimate understanding of every line of code that kept TechFlow Solutions running. He was about to learn the difference between having access and having control, and I was about to teach him that some systems are built to recognize their true administrator, regardless of what the corporate org chart says. The first thing I did after leaving TechFlow was drive. Not to my apartment, not to grab lunch, just drive through Austin's downtown streets while my mind tried to catch up with what had just happened. The city looked the same as it had that morning. Same food trucks parked along South First, same joggers circling Lady Bird Lake, same tech workers, hurrying between buildings with their laptops and determination. But everything felt different now, like I was viewing it all through a filter of disbelief and growing rage. I ended up at a coffee shop on East 6th Street, the kind of place where freelancers camp out with their MacBooks and pretend they're the next Steve Jobs. The barista was a college student with purple hair and multiple piercings who looked at me with the kind of concern reserved for people who appear to be having existential crises in public spaces. "Rough day?" she asked as she handed me my latte. You could say that. I found a corner table and opened my laptop, muscle memory driving me to check my work email. The login screen appeared. I entered my credentials and watched the familiar rejection message appear. Account not found or password incorrect. I tried again with the same result. It was real then. Not a nightmare, not some elaborate prank. They'd actually done it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Amanda's number. She picked up on the first ring, her voice small and guilty. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you, but they made me sign a confidentiality agreement. Kevin said if I told anyone about the transition plan before the official announcement, I'd be terminated immediately." "What transition plan?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand that there had been a plan, carefully orchestrated and deliberately hidden from me. Amanda was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. "It started about a month ago. James Morrison called a senior staff meeting, but you were in Dallas that week working on the client implementation. They told us there would be organizational changes, that they were bringing in new leadership with fresh perspectives." I remembered that Dallas trip. 3 days of 18-hour workdays, troubleshooting integration issues for our biggest client, sleeping in airport hotels and living on vending machine coffee. I'd been proud of that project, had personally ensured it went live without a hitch. While I was there saving the company's most important relationship, they were back in Austin planning my professional execution. "Kevin started asking questions about your work," Amanda continued. "Not directly, but he'd drop by asking about your current projects, your access levels, what systems you maintained. He framed it as planning for better documentation and knowledge transfer." Knowledge transfer, the corporate euphemism for making someone replaceable. Then Tyler showed up, she said. "James introduced him as a consulting analyst, said he was there to learn about our operations and provide recommendations for efficiency improvements. But Sarah, he wasn't analyzing anything. He was shadowing you specifically. Every time you were in a meeting or away from your desk, he was there asking me about your processes, your methodologies, even your daily schedule." I felt sick. While I'd been mentoring junior developers and staying late to optimize database performance, Tyler Morrison had been conducting reconnaissance on my professional life. Every lunch break, every client call, every moment I wasn't physically guarding my territory, he'd been there learning how to replace me. "Did anyone else know?" I asked. The senior management team definitely knew. Marcus from development kept making jokes about family business and corporate dynasties. Lisa from project management seemed uncomfortable about the whole thing, but she never said anything directly. Lisa Rodriguez had been my mentor when I first started at TechFlow, the person who'd taught me how to navigate corporate politics and build alliances across departments. If she'd known what was coming and hadn't warned me, that betrayal cut almost as deep as the replacement itself. "What about my projects?" I asked. "The client portal launches next week. The database optimization initiative is only half finished. Tyler's been briefed on everything. He has copies of all your documentation, access to your project files. They're treating it like you're on vacation and he's covering for you temporarily, except everyone knows it's permanent." I hung up and stared at my laptop screen, at the email account that no longer recognized my existence. 3 years of building, something I was proud of, and they'd transferred it all to someone who probably couldn't spell database without spell check. But something was nagging at me, a technical detail that Tyler and his uncle might not have considered. I'd built TechFlow's database infrastructure with multiple layers of security, not just because it was good practice, but because I'd never fully trusted that my job was secure. The tech industry was notorious for sudden layoffs and reorganizations, and I'd learned early in my career to protect myself. I opened a new browser window and navigated to a URL that wasn't in any of TechFlow's official documentation. It was a development sandbox I'd created for testing new features and troubleshooting issues, hosted on a separate server cluster that reported to the main system but operated independently. Technically, it was part of TechFlow's infrastructure, but practically, it was invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. The login screen appeared, and I held my breath as I entered my credentials. Green checkmark. Access granted. From this back door, I could see everything. Not just the database tables and query logs, but the real-time system performance metrics, user access patterns, and error reports. What I saw made me smile for the first time since walking into my former office that morning. Tyler had been busy. In the few hours since I'd left, he'd attempted to run 17 different database queries. 14 of them had failed with syntax errors. The 3 that had succeeded were simple select statements that pulled basic user information, the kind of queries a first-year computer science student could write. But the real entertainment was in the error logs. Tyler had spent 45 minutes trying to access the administrative control panel for the client portal, the system I'd built to manage data integration for our largest accounts. Every attempt had been blocked by authentication protocols that required not just a password, but biometric verification through my personal security token. He'd tried to reset the master administrator password 6 times. Each attempt had triggered additional security layers that I'd built into the system, protocols that would eventually lock out unauthorized users entirely if they continued their failed access attempts. Tyler Morrison might have my job title and my office, but he was about to discover that being handed something and actually controlling it were 2 very different things. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Heard about the transition. Coffee tomorrow? We should talk. Lisa Rodriguez." My former mentor, who'd apparently known what was coming and said nothing. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. I drove home to my small apartment in East Austin, the kind of place that was probably going to be gentrified out of existence in the next few years. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. But it was mine. I'd furnished it slowly and carefully, choosing pieces that would last, investing in quality over quantity. It was the first place I'd ever lived that felt like home, rather than just a temporary stop. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my small balcony, looking out over the neighborhood where food trucks and dive bars existed, alongside gleaming new condos and artisanal coffee shops. Austin was changing, growing, becoming something different than what it had been when I'd first moved here after college. Maybe I was changing too. My laptop chimed with a notification. Another error report from TechFlow's system, automatically, forwarded to my personal email address. Tyler had been at it for hours now, systematically trying to access every administrative function I'd built into the database infrastructure. Each attempt was logged, time-stamped, and documented with the kind of detail that would make a security audit team very happy. By 10 o'clock that night, he'd generated 43 separate error reports and successfully completed exactly 0 administrative tasks. The client portal was running on automated systems I'd designed to function without constant oversight. But any significant changes or updates would require administrative approval that Tyler simply couldn't provide. I finished my wine and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. Part 3. The full scope. The next morning brought clarity and coffee in that order. I woke up knowing exactly what I needed to do, starting with understanding the full extent of what had been done to me. This wasn't just about losing a job. It was about having my professional identity systematically dismantled while I was too busy working to notice the knife sliding between my ribs. I started with LinkedIn. Tyler Morrison's profile had been updated overnight. His new title, Database Manager at TechFlow Solutions, was prominently displayed along with a professional headshot that screamed expensive photographer and family money. His experience section had been padded with descriptions of complex database architecture implementation and enterprise-level system optimization, accomplishments that belonged to me but were now attributed to him. The endorsements were already pouring in. James Morrison himself had written a glowing recommendation about Tyler's innovative approach to data management and natural leadership abilities. Kevin Walsh from HR had endorsed him for database administration and team leadership. Even Amanda, my own assistant, had endorsed him for technical expertise. It was like watching my professional obituary being written by people who were dancing on my grave. But the most telling detail was in Tyler's employment history. According to his updated profile, he'd been a database consultant at TechFlow for the past 3 months, not the 2 weeks Amanda had mentioned. They'd been planning this even longer than I'd realized, carefully constructing a narrative that would make his promotion seem earned rather than inherited. I dug deeper, using my industry connections and professional networks to piece together the timeline. What I discovered was a masterclass in corporate manipulation. 3 months ago, while I'd been focused on the client portal project, James Morrison had started laying the groundwork for this transition. He'd reached out to other companies in Austin's tech scene, asking about their succession planning strategies and knowledge transfer protocols. He'd consulted with HR specialists about managing organizational change and minimizing disruption during leadership transitions. This wasn't nepotism. It was strategic nepotism, carefully planned and professionally executed. I found email threads on industry forums where James had posed hypothetical questions about replacing senior technical staff with emerging talent. He'd framed it as forward-thinking leadership, bringing in digital natives who could modernize. Legacy systems. The responses had been overwhelmingly supportive, praising his commitment to innovation and growth. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source: procurement records. TechFlow was a private company, but they worked with enough government contracts that certain financial information was publicly available. 3 months ago, they'd purchased executive transition consulting services from a firm that specialized in what they called talent realignment. I called the consulting firm, pretending to be a business journalist writing about corporate restructuring trends. The account manager was happy to discuss their methodology in general terms. "The key is making the transition appear organic," she explained. "You can't just bring in new leadership without proper justification. You need to create a narrative that supports the change, document performance gaps or strategic misalignments that require fresh perspectives. What about existing employees who might resist the change? That's where documentation becomes crucial. You need to establish a paper trail that supports the transition decision. Performance reviews, project assessments, stakeholder feedback. The goal is to make it clear that the change is necessary for organizational success, not personal preference." I hung up feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. They hadn't just replaced me, They'd built a case for why replacing me was the right business decision. Every late night I'd worked, every weekend I'd spent troubleshooting system issues, every time I'd prioritized the company's needs over my own, had been twisted into evidence that I was somehow inadequate for the role. But then I remembered something that made me smile. All of their careful planning, all of their strategic documentation, all of their corporate consulting had overlooked one crucial detail: the actual technical implementation. You can't consult your way into understanding 3 years of custom database architecture. You can't document your way into mastering complex system integrations. And you definitely can't nepotism your way into the kind of deep technical knowledge that comes from building something from the ground up. I opened my laptop and checked the error logs again. Tyler's second day was going about as well as his first. He'd managed to successfully run a few more basic queries, but anything requiring administrative privileges was still failing spectacularly. The client portal was starting to show performance degradation as automated maintenance routines that required manual oversight went unattended. More importantly, I'd started receiving automated alerts about system vulnerabilities. The database infrastructure I'd built included security protocols that updated regularly, requiring administrator approval for critical patches and security fixes. Tyler didn't just lack the access to approve these updates. He probably didn't even understand what they were. TechFlow's entire digital infrastructure was slowly becoming less secure with each passing hour that Tyler tried and failed to properly administer the systems. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized: Marcus Webb from TechFlow's development team. Marcus and I had worked together on several major projects, and he'd always been straight with me about office politics and management decisions. "Sarah, what the hell happened?" he asked without preamble. "You tell me. You were in those senior staff meetings where they planned this." I was, but I thought it was theoretical. James kept talking about bringing in fresh perspectives and modernizing our approach, but I never thought he meant replacing you. When Kevin asked us to document our interactions with the database team, I figured it was for some kind of efficiency study. "Did you know Tyler was James's nephew?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Not initially. James introduced him as a consulting analyst with a computer science background. It wasn't until last week that someone mentioned the family connection, and by then the transition was already in motion." "What's the mood in the office today?" "Tense. Tyler spent most of yesterday trying to access administrative functions that keep rejecting his credentials. He's been asking everyone for help with basic database operations, things you could do in your sleep. People are starting to realize this might not go as smoothly as management promised." And management's response? Kevin's been in damage control mode all morning. He sent out an email about transition periods requiring patience and supporting new leadership during knowledge transfer. But Sarah, the client portal is starting to lag, and we've got 3 major implementations scheduled for next week. I felt a grim satisfaction hearing that reality was beginning to intrude on their careful plans. "What about James? How's he handling his nephew's struggles?" "That's the thing. James hasn't been in the office since Monday morning. He introduced Tyler, made the announcement, then disappeared. Word is he's at some executive retreat in California, unavailable for the rest of the week." Of course he was. James Morrison had orchestrated this corporate coup and then left town, letting Tyler sink or swim on his own while avoiding any personal responsibility for the chaos that followed. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me," I said. "I need you to document everything. Every failed query, every system error, every time Tyler asks for help with something basic. Keep records of system performance degradation and any client complaints that come in." Why? Because when this whole thing falls apart, and it will fall apart, there needs to be a clear record of what happened and who was responsible. After I hung up with Marcus, I spent the afternoon building my own documentation. Screenshots of error logs, performance metrics showing system degradation, records of security vulnerabilities that were going unaddressed. I created a comprehensive timeline of Tyler's failed attempts to manage the database infrastructure, complete with technical analysis of each error and its potential impact on business operations. But the most damning evidence came from the client side. I'd built relationships with several of TechFlow's major clients over the years, technical contacts who relied on the database systems I'd created. I reached out to a few of them, ostensibly to check on their satisfaction with recent services. What I learned was alarming. The response times for data queries had increased by 30% since Monday. 2 clients had experienced intermittent connectivity issues with the portal I'd built for them. One client had been unable to access critical reports that required administrative approval to generate. Tyler wasn't just failing to manage the systems. His incompetence was actively damaging TechFlow's client relationships. By Thursday evening, I had compiled a file that would make any employment lawyer salivate. Clear evidence of corporate nepotism, documentation of decreased system performance under Tyler's management, records of security vulnerabilities being ignored, and testimony from colleagues about the planned nature of my replacement. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. I wanted to see how much worse things could get before management admitted their mistake. I didn't have to wait long. Part 4. The immediate fallout. Friday morning brought the kind of crisis that every database administrator dreads and every incompetent replacement creates. I was at my neighborhood coffee shop, reading industry blogs and pretending to care about other companies' technical achievements, when my phone started buzzing with messages from former colleagues. The first came from Amanda. "Sarah, please, tell me you're available for emergency consulting. Something's very wrong with the client portal." Then Marcus. "The main database just crashed. Tyler's been trying to restore from backup for 3 hours with no success. Clients are calling screaming." Finally, Kevin Walsh himself. "Sarah, we need to discuss bringing you back as a temporary consultant to resolve some technical difficulties." I finished my coffee slowly, savoring both the Colombian blend and the Schadenfreude. 3.5 days. That's how long it had taken for Tyler Morrison's incompetence to create a genuine business emergency. I called Marcus first. "How bad is it?" "Remember that optimization routine you built into the client portal? The one that runs maintenance tasks during off-peak hours? The automated cleanup protocol. It runs every Thursday night to purge temporary files and rebuild query indexes. Well, Tyler tried to modify it yesterday because he said it was unnecessarily complex. He deleted what he thought were redundant backup procedures." I felt my stomach drop. The backup procedures weren't redundant. They were fail-safes that protected data integrity during the maintenance routine. Without them, the automated cleanup would eventually corrupt the database indexes. Tell me he didn't run the modified routine. He did, at 2 a.m. this morning. The client portal database is completely corrupted. We can't access client data, generate reports, or process new transactions. 3 major clients have already called threatening to cancel their contracts. Where's Tyler now? Locked in your old office with a stack of technical manuals, trying to figure out how to restore from backup. Problem is, the backup system requires administrative authentication that he doesn't have. I almost laughed. Tyler had created a crisis that only I could solve, then locked himself out of the tools needed to fix it. It was like watching someone set their house on fire and then realize they didn't know how to call the fire department. What about James? Has he been reached? Kevin's been trying to contact him since 6 a.m. Apparently, his executive retreat is at some digital detox resort where they confiscate phones and electronics. The earliest they can get a message to him is Monday morning. Perfect. James. Morrison had engineered this disaster and then disappeared into a technology-free meditation retreat, leaving his nephew to clean up the mess with skills he didn't possess. My phone rang. Kevin Walsh. "Sarah, thank God you answered. We have a situation that requires your expertise." I heard. Database corruption is a serious issue. "Can you come in today? We'll pay your consulting rate, whatever it is. We just need to get the client portal operational again. I pretended to consider this. I'm not sure I'm available for consulting work. I've been exploring other opportunities. Sarah, please. I know the transition was abrupt, but this is bigger than internal politics. We have clients threatening lawsuits over data access issues. What's Tyler's assessment of the situation? Kevin was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Tyler is learning the complexity of the systems you built. He may have underestimated the technical requirements of the role. Translation: Tyler Morrison was in over his head, and everyone knew it. I'll need full administrative access restored, I said. All of my credentials, security clearances, and system privileges. And I'll need a written agreement that this consulting arrangement doesn't constitute an admission of wrongdoing in my termination. Done. Can you be here in an hour? I'll be there in 2 hours. And Kevin? Have Tyler document exactly what he changed in the maintenance routine. I'll need a complete record of his modifications to assess the damage. I drove to TechFlow with a mixture of satisfaction and professional obligation. Part of me wanted to let them suffer the consequences of their nepotistic decision-making, but another part of me couldn't stand to see 3 years of careful work destroyed by someone's incompetence. The TechFlow parking garage felt like returning to a crime scene. Same concrete walls, same numbered spaces, but everything tinged with the memory of being forced out of my own professional life. I parked in the visitor section, a small detail that reminded everyone that I no longer belonged here. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was surreal. Just 5 days ago, I'd made this same journey thinking I was going to my job. Now I was returning as a hired gun, brought in to clean up the mess created by my replacement. The office atmosphere was tense in a way I'd never experienced before. Conversations stopped when I walked past. Colleagues who had watched my humiliation on Monday now looked at me with a mixture of guilt and relief, ashamed of their silence but grateful for my return. Amanda practically ran to greet me. Sarah, I'm so sorry about everything. I should have warned you, should have found a way to tell you what was happening. You were protecting your job, I said. I understand. Tyler's voice carried across the office from my former workspace, now his command center of confusion. He was on the phone, speaking in the kind of controlled panic that comes from being completely out of your depth but trying to maintain professional composure. No, sir, I can't provide an estimated time for restoration. The previous administrator used a highly customized architecture that requires specialized knowledge to repair. I walked past his office without stopping, noting the stack of database administration textbooks on the desk, the multiple monitors displaying error messages, and Tyler himself, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Kevin appeared at my side, immediately. Thank you for coming. Your old computer is still set up in the conference room. I've had IT restore all your access credentials. What about Tyler? Tyler is consulting on the restoration process. You'll be leading the technical recovery efforts. I sat down at the conference room computer and logged in with my restored credentials. The familiar interface appeared, and for a moment, it felt like coming home. Then I opened the system logs and saw the full extent of the damage Tyler had caused. It was worse than Marcus had described. Tyler hadn't just deleted backup procedures. He'd fundamentally altered the database structure in ways that revealed a dangerous lack of understanding about relational database design. He'd removed foreign key constraints he thought were unnecessary, deleted stored procedures he couldn't understand, and modified table schemas in ways that broke data relationships across the entire system. The client portal wasn't just corrupted, it was architecturally compromised. Fixing this would require not just restoring from backup, but rebuilding significant portions of the database structure and re-establishing data relationships that Tyler's modifications had destroyed. I spent 20 minutes analyzing the damage, documenting each error and its cascading effects throughout the system. Then I walked to Tyler's office and knocked on the doorframe. He looked up from his textbooks with the expression of a drowning man seeing a life preserver. "Sarah, Kevin said you were coming in to consult on the restoration. I've been working on this all night, but your system architecture is incredibly complex." "It's not complex," I said calmly. "It's comprehensive. There's a difference." I sat down across from his desk and opened my laptop. "Show me exactly what you changed in the maintenance routine." For the next hour, Tyler walked me through his modifications, each one revealing a deeper misunderstanding of how database systems actually function. He'd approached my architecture like a college project, assuming he could simplify and improve it without understanding the business logic that drove every design decision. "Why did you remove the referential integrity checks?" I asked. "They seemed redundant. The application layer already validates data input, so I thought the database-level checks were unnecessary overhead." I closed my laptop and looked at him directly. "Tyler, those checks aren't redundant. They're the last line of defense against data corruption. The application layer validates user input, but the database layer protects against system failures, concurrent access issues, and exactly the kind of architectural changes you just made." His face flushed red. "I was trying to optimize performance. The system seemed overly complicated for what it needed to accomplish." "The system was complicated because the business requirements are complicated. Every piece of unnecessary code you removed was there for a specific reason, solving a specific problem that you haven't encountered yet." I spent the rest of the afternoon rebuilding Tyler's mess. It required restoring from a backup that was 4 days old, then manually reapplying all the legitimate updates and changes that had occurred since then. I had to reconstruct data relationships, rebuild indexes, and reestablish security protocols that Tyler's modifications had broken. By 6 p.m., the client portal was operational again. By 7 p.m., I'd implemented additional safeguards to prevent this kind of architectural damage in the future. By 8 p.m., I'd documented every aspect of the recovery process and the systemic failures that had caused the crisis. Tyler watched most of this work from his office, occasionally asking questions that revealed just how little he understood about the systems he'd been put in charge of. It wasn't entirely his fault. He'd been thrown into a role he wasn't qualified for and expected to manage systems he'd never built. But his arrogance in assuming he could improve my work without understanding it had nearly destroyed 3 years of careful development. As I packed up my laptop to leave, Kevin appeared with a contract and a check. "Thank you for saving us," he said. "The consulting fee is generous, and there's a bonus for the rapid resolution." I looked at the check. It was indeed generous, more than I'd made in 2 months of my regular salary. Crisis consulting paid well, especially when you were the only person who could solve the crisis. "Will Tyler be receiving additional training?" I asked. Kevin's expression was carefully neutral. "We're evaluating our technical support resources and considering various options for ensuring system stability." Translation: they were finally realizing that nepotism and competence weren't the same thing. I drove home that evening feeling vindicated, but not satisfied. I'd proven my value and highlighted Tyler's incompetence, but I was still the outsider brought in to clean up someone else's mess. My former life at TechFlow was still gone, replaced by the humiliating role of emergency consultant. But something had changed in the office dynamic. Colleagues who'd watched my replacement with uncomfortable silence now looked at me with respect, and Tyler with doubt. The narrative that I was outdated and he was innovative had been shattered by objective, technical reality. Tyler Morrison might have my job title and my office, but he'd just proven to everyone that he couldn't do my job. The question was, what would I do with that knowledge? Part 5. The Time Jump and Survival Mode. 6 months later, I was debugging Python code for a nonprofit organization that helped refugees find employment in the tech sector. The work was meaningful in ways that corporate database management had never been, but the pay was about 40% of what I'd made at TechFlow, and my East Austin apartment was starting to feel less like a choice and more like a necessity. The nonprofit, called TechBridge Austin, operated out of a converted warehouse in the Arts District. The space had exposed brick walls, communal work tables, and the kind of inspiring mission statements that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with technology in the first place. We were building systems to match refugee skills with employer needs, creating databases that connected human potential with economic opportunity. My official title was Senior Technical Consultant, which sounded impressive, but meant I was essentially a one-person IT department for an organization that survived on grants and donations. I maintained their website, managed their constituent database, and built custom applications to streamline their job placement process. It was the kind of work that felt important even when the paycheck was depressing. The coffee shop downstairs from the nonprofit became my second office, a place where I could spread out with my laptop and work on freelance projects that supplemented my nonprofit salary. The owner, a former tech worker named Maria who'd burned out of the startup scene, knew my story and kept my corner table reserved during the afternoon hours when I needed to focus. It was at that corner table, on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, that my carefully rebuilt life intersected with my TechFlow past in a way I never expected. I was working on a database optimization project for a small e-commerce company when my laptop chimed with a LinkedIn notification. Someone had tagged me in a post. I almost ignored it. Most LinkedIn activity was just professional networking noise that had little relevance to my current situation. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked through to see what had caught the algorithm's attention. The post was from Tyler Morrison, and it made my blood pressure spike immediately. Thrilled to announce my promotion to Senior Database Manager at TechFlow Solutions. This past 6 months has been an incredible journey of growth and innovation. Looking forward to leading our next phase of technical evolution. Database management. Tech leadership. Innovation. The post included a professional photo of Tyler in an expensive suit, standing in what I recognized as the TechFlow conference room, where I'd spent countless hours presenting system architectures and project proposals. The image was carefully staged to project competence and authority, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes that professional photography couldn't quite hide. The comment section was a parade of congratulations from colleagues and industry connections, many of whom I recognized from my own professional network. James Morrison had written a glowing response about Tyler's exceptional technical leadership and innovative approach to database management. Kevin Walsh from HR had added his own praise about Tyler's seamless integration into senior management. But what really caught my attention was a comment from Marcus Webb. Congratulations, Tyler. The system stability improvements over the past 6 months have been impressive. System stability improvements. I almost laughed out loud. I knew exactly what those improvements were because I'd been getting automated error reports forwarded to my personal email for months. The technical issue was strange and shouldn't have been happening. When TechFlow's IT department had restored my access credentials for the emergency consulting work, they'd apparently failed to remove my email address from certain automated system alerts. Every week, I received reports about database performance metrics, security patch installations, and system maintenance activities. I should have mentioned this to Kevin or had the notification stopped, but professional curiosity had gotten the better of me. I wanted to see how Tyler was managing the systems I'd built, whether he'd learned from his disastrous first week or continued to struggle with the technical complexities of database administration. What I'd observed over 6 months was a pattern of managed incompetence. Tyler had clearly received significant technical training and support, probably expensive consulting from database specialists who could guide him through routine maintenance tasks. The systems were stable, but they weren't evolving or improving. No new features, no performance optimizations, no innovative solutions to business challenges. Tyler Morrison had learned to maintain what I'd built, but he hadn't learned to build anything himself. The error reports also revealed something else interesting. Tyler was still locked out of several administrative functions that required my original security credentials. The most sensitive systems, the ones that controlled financial data and client confidentiality settings, continued to require biometric authentication that Tyler couldn't provide. He'd found workarounds, ways to access necessary information without triggering the advanced security protocols. But these workarounds were inefficient and limited his ability to make significant system changes. Tyler Morrison wasn't just maintaining my architecture, he was trapped by it. I was scrolling through the comments on his promotion post when another LinkedIn notification appeared. A direct message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. "Sarah, we need to talk. Are you available for coffee this week? Lisa Rodriguez." Lisa Rodriguez. My former mentor who'd known about my replacement and said nothing, who'd reached out the day after my termination with an offer to talk that I'd ignored. I stared at her message for several minutes, debating whether to respond. Professional curiosity won again. "I'm available Thursday afternoon. The coffee shop on East 6th near the TechBridge office." Her reply came back within minutes. "Perfect. 3 p.m.? Thursday afternoon arrived with the kind of October weather that made Austin feel like paradise. Clear skies, comfortable temperature, just enough breeze to make sitting outside pleasant. I arrived at the coffee shop early and claimed a table. On the small patio, positioning myself where I could see Lisa approaching but also where our conversation would be private. Lisa looked different than I remembered. Still professionally dressed, but with a tension around her eyes that suggested the past 6 months hadn't been entirely pleasant for her either. She ordered a large coffee and sat down across from me, with the careful posture of someone about to have a difficult conversation. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began. "I know you have every reason to refuse." "I'm curious," I said simply. "I left TechFlow 3 weeks ago." That surprised me. Lisa had been with the company for almost 8 years, long enough to be considered part of the institutional foundation. Voluntary or involuntary? Technically voluntary. I submitted my resignation after it became clear that my role was being marginalized. She paused. "The same way yours was, just more gradually." Lisa explained that the replacement of senior technical staff with Morrison family connections hadn't ended with me. Over the 6 months since my departure, 2 other department heads had been restructured out of their positions, replaced by younger relatives or family friends who lacked the experience and institutional knowledge of the people they'd replaced. "James is systematically replacing the senior technical team with people he can control," she said. "It's not about competence or performance. It's about loyalty and family politics." "Why didn't you warn me?" Lisa's face flushed with obvious guilt. "I thought I could protect you from the inside. I thought if I played along with the transition, I could help you navigate the politics and find a way to stay." I was naive. "What changed your mind?" "Tyler's promotion. James announced it last week as a reward for Tyler's exceptional performance in system stabilization. But Sarah, I've been watching those systems. Tyler hasn't improved anything. He's barely maintaining what you built, and only because he's received extensive outside consulting support." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of screenshots. Internal emails discussing Tyler's performance, budget allocations for database consulting services, and most damning, a conversation between James Morrison and Kevin Walsh about managing Tyler's learning curve until he can function independently. "They know he's incompetent," Lisa said, "but they're promoting him anyway because admitting his incompetence means admitting they made a mistake in replacing you." I studied the screenshots, particularly the budget information. TechFlow had spent more on database consulting in the past 6 months than they'd paid me an annual salary. The consulting invoices Lisa showed me were staggering. TechFlow Solutions, Inc., a premium consulting firm that charged $300 per hour, had been working with TechFlow for 4 months. Their itemized billing included emergency database recovery, administrative training services, system architecture review, and ongoing technical support. Tyler Morrison wasn't managing TechFlow's database infrastructure. He was the expensive figurehead while actual experts did the work behind the scenes, then disappeared before anyone could ask uncomfortable questions about why a senior database manager needed round-the-clock technical support. "There's more," Lisa said, scrolling through her phone. "Tyler's been asking increasingly desperate questions in internal Slack channels. Last week, he posted in the development channel asking how to make the database run faster because client complaints about system performance were increasing." She showed me the screenshot. Tyler's message was followed by a long silence, then Marcus Webb's diplomatic response suggesting that database optimization required detailed analysis of query patterns and index usage, and recommending that Tyler consult with specialized database performance experts. What did Tyler say to that? He asked if Marcus knew any good YouTube tutorials on database optimization. I had to laugh. 6 months after replacing me, Tyler Morrison was trying to learn my job from YouTube videos while TechFlow paid premium consulting rates to keep their systems functional. But the most revealing screenshot was an email chain between James Morrison and Kevin Walsh discussing Tyler's adjustment period. James had written, "Tyler is still developing his technical expertise, but his leadership potential is evident. We need to provide adequate support structure while he grows into the role." Kevin's response was more direct. "The consulting costs are becoming unsustainable. We're spending more on external database support than we saved by restructuring Sarah's position. Tyler needs to demonstrate independent competence soon, or we'll need to reconsider our approach." "When was this email sent?" I asked. 2 weeks. Hours right before Tyler's promotion was announced. The timeline was clear. Rather than admit their mistake and bring in competent technical leadership, TechFlow's management had doubled down on their nepotistic decision by promoting Tyler and hoping the optics would distract from the underlying problems. "Lisa, why? Are you showing me this?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Because TechFlow is in trouble, and it's going to get worse. The consulting firm they've been using is ending their contract next month. They've stabilized the systems Tyler damaged, but they're not willing to continue providing ongoing support indefinitely." "What does that mean for Tyler?" "It means he'll be managing those systems independently for the first time since you left. And Sarah, based on what I've observed, he's not ready. The systems are more complex now than when you built them. They've grown to accommodate new clients and expanded functionality. Tyler understands the basics, but he doesn't have the deep architectural knowledge needed to troubleshoot complex issues or implement significant changes." I sipped my coffee and considered what Lisa was telling me. TechFlow had created an elaborate and expensive house of cards to maintain the illusion that Tyler Morrison was a competent database administrator. When that support structure disappeared, the illusion would collapse, and the technical problems would resurface immediately. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "TechFlow is pitching for a major contract with Austin Municipal Services. If they win it, they'll need to integrate their database systems with city government infrastructure. It's the kind of complex, high-security implementation that requires real expertise, not YouTube tutorials and consulting support." The Austin Municipal Services contract was legendary in local tech circles. The city had been modernizing its digital infrastructure for years, awarding contracts to companies that could demonstrate both technical competence and security reliability. It was the kind of project that could transform a mid-sized company like TechFlow into a major regional player. It was also the kind of project that would expose Tyler Morrison's limitations immediately and publicly. "When's the final presentation?" 3 weeks. James has been positioning Tyler as the technical lead for the proposal. Tyler's supposed to present the database architecture and security protocols to the city's IT review board. I felt a mixture of anticipation and professional horror. Tyler Morrison presenting complex database architecture to government IT specialists. would be like watching someone who'd learned to drive from YouTube videos attempt the Indianapolis 500. "Lisa, what do you want from me?" She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what she was about to ask. "I want to give you information. Inside information about TechFlow's vulnerabilities, about Tyler's ongoing struggles, about the real financial impact of their decision to replace you." "Why?" "Because I feel guilty about what happened to you, and because TechFlow is making the same mistakes with other people. James Morrison is systematically replacing competent professionals with family connections, and it's going to destroy the company eventually." I studied Lisa's face, trying to read her motivations. She seemed genuine, but she'd also demonstrated that her loyalty was situational. 6 months ago, she'd prioritized her own job security over warning me about my impending replacement. "What kind of information?" Lisa pulled out a flash drive and set it on the table between us. "Email archives, budget reports, performance metrics, client complaints. Everything documenting Tyler's failures and the company's attempts to cover them up." "That's corporate espionage, Lisa. You could face serious legal consequences." "I copied everything before I resigned. Technically, it's not theft if I accessed it while I was still employed." She paused. "And honestly, I'm past caring about legal technicalities. TechFlow destroyed my career just like they destroyed yours. The only difference is they did it more slowly." I looked at the flash drive but didn't touch it. "What do you expect me to do with this information?" "Whatever you think is appropriate. Expose Tyler's incompetence, document the financial waste, show potential clients what they're really getting when they hire TechFlow." The offer was tempting. 6 months of frustration and professional humiliation had left me with a desire for vindication that was hard to ignore. The opportunity to prove that Tyler Morrison was a fraud and that my replacement had been a costly mistake was exactly the kind of closure I'd been seeking. But something about Lisa's approach bothered me. This felt reactive, destructive rather, than constructive. Exposing Tyler's failures might provide temporary satisfaction, but it wouldn't rebuild my career or create new opportunities for growth. "I need to think about this," I said. "I understand. But Sarah, don't think too long. Tyler's going to fail publicly with or without our help. The question is whether you want to be positioned to benefit when it happens." After Lisa left, I sat on the coffee shop patio for another hour, turning the flash drive over in my hands without plugging it into my laptop. The information it contained could probably destroy Tyler Morrison's career and embarrass TechFlow's management. But I wasn't sure that revenge was what I actually wanted. My phone buzzed with a text message from Maria, the TechBridge director. "Sarah, can you come upstairs when you have a minute? We just received an interesting opportunity." I pocketed the flash drive and headed back to the nonprofit offices. Maria was in her small corner office, surrounded by grant applications and program reports, but her expression was more excited than her usual focused determination. "I just got off the phone with Austin Municipal Services," she said. "They're looking for a nonprofit partner to help implement their new job placement database. They want an organization that understands both technology and workforce development." "That sounds like a perfect fit for TechBridge." "It is, but there's a catch. They need someone with enterprise-level database experience to lead the technical implementation. Someone who can design secure, scalable systems that integrate with existing city infrastructure." I immediately understood where this conversation was heading. They need someone like me. They need exactly you. Sarah, this could be huge for TechBridge. The contract includes funding for a full-time senior database architect position. You could do meaningful work helping refugees and immigrants while building the kind of technical systems you're passionate about. The opportunity was intriguing, but something about the timing seemed suspiciously convenient. "Maria, how did Austin Municipal Services hear about TechBridge's work?" She grinned. "That's the interesting part. Apparently, One of their IT managers is a refugee from Somalia who found his current job through our placement program 2 years ago. He's been advocating internally for partnerships with organizations that understand the challenges immigrants face in the tech sector. It wasn't revenge or corporate espionage. It was an opportunity to build something new and meaningful while using the same skills that TechFlow had discarded. The contrast with Lisa's offer of destructive information was stark and clarifying. What's the timeline for the proposal? 6 weeks to submit a comprehensive technical proposal. If we're selected, implementation would begin in January. I thought about Tyler Morrison struggling to present database architecture to city IT specialists while I was potentially designing systems that would actually serve Austin's immigrant and refugee communities. The symmetry was satisfying in a way that simple revenge couldn't match. "I'm interested," I said. "Very interested." That evening, I sat in my small apartment with 2 paths laid out before me. Lisa's flash drive sat on my coffee table, containing information that could expose Tyler Morrison's incompetence and TechFlow's mismanagement. On my laptop screen was the preliminary documentation for Austin Municipal Services Workforce Development Database Project, an opportunity to build something important and lasting. I could destroy or I could create. I made my choice and put the flash drive in my desk drawer without opening it. Then I opened a new document and began outlining the technical architecture for a database system that would help refugees and immigrants build new lives in Austin. The next morning, I called Lisa and told her I wouldn't be using the information she'd provided. She seemed disappointed, but not entirely surprised. "What changed your mind?" she asked. I realized I don't want to win by making Tyler Morrison lose. I want to win by building something better than anything he could ever manage. And if TechFlow wins the municipal contract, then they'll have to present Tyler's technical leadership to the same IT review board that will be evaluating my proposal for TechBridge. May the best database architect win. I spent the next 3 weeks developing the most comprehensive technical proposal of my career. Not just a database design, but a complete workforce development platform that would connect job seekers with opportunities, track placement outcomes, and provide analytics to improve program effectiveness. The system I designed would integrate with existing city databases while maintaining strict privacy protections for vulnerable populations. It included multilingual interfaces, mobile accessibility, and robust security protocols that reflected my understanding of both technical requirements and human needs. More importantly, it was the kind of innovative, forward-thinking architecture that Tyler Morrison couldn't even understand, let alone replicate. As I worked on the proposal, I occasionally checked the automated error reports that continued arriving from TechFlow's systems. The pattern was consistent. Basic maintenance tasks completed successfully, but no innovation, no improvements, no evolution of the systems I'd originally built. Tyler Morrison had learned to maintain my work, but he'd never learned to surpass. Halkar, 3 days before the Austin Municipal Services presentations were scheduled, I received an unexpected email from Marcus Webb at TechFlow. "Sarah, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Tyler's been asking the development team for help preparing his presentation to the city. He's specifically asked about database security protocols and integration methodologies. I thought you should know that he's struggling with concepts that you designed and implemented." The email continued. "I can't provide specific details about TechFlow's proposal, but I can tell you that Tyler's technical preparation has been concerning. Management brought in another consulting firm to help him prepare, but even with coaching, his understanding of the systems seems superficial." Marcus concluded with, "I don't know what you're working on these days, but if you're involved in any city projects, I think you should know that TechFlow's technical leadership isn't what it appears to be." I smiled reading Marcus's careful diplomatic language. He was telling me, without explicitly stating it, that Tyler Morrison was about to embarrass himself publicly, and that anyone competing against TechFlow for city contracts should be prepared to demonstrate genuine technical competence. The morning of the presentations arrived with typical Austin October perfection. Clear skies, comfortable temperature, and the kind of light that made everything seem possible. I dressed carefully in my best professional suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews after leaving TechFlow but had never needed to wear. The Austin Municipal Services offices were in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel and aspirational architecture. I arrived early and used the extra time to review my presentation one final time, checking each technical diagram and implementation timeline. TechBridge's presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. TechFlow's presentation was scheduled for 11 a.m. I would be presenting first, establishing the technical standard that Tyler Morrison would have to match. Maria met me in the lobby, looking nervous but determined. "Ready to change some lives?" she asked. "Ready to build something that matters," I replied. The presentation went flawlessly. The city's IT review board asked detailed technical questions about security protocols, data integration strategies, and scalability planning. I answered each question with the confidence that comes from deep understanding, providing specific examples and technical details that demonstrated both expertise and practical experience. When they asked about my background, I briefly mentioned my previous role as Senior Database Administrator at TechFlow Solutions, focusing on the systems I'd built and the challenges I'd solved rather than the circumstances of my departure. The review board's questions became increasingly complex and technical as the presentation progressed, testing not just my proposal, but my genuine understanding of enterprise database architecture. I welcomed each challenge, using their questions as opportunities to demonstrate the depth of knowledge that 3 years of hands-on experience had provided. By the end of our 45-minute session, the lead reviewer was nodding approvingly. "Ms. Chen, this is one of the most comprehensive technical proposals we've reviewed. Your integration strategy addresses concerns we weren't sure any contractor would understand." As Maria and I packed up our materials, I heard familiar voices in the hallway outside the conference room. James Morrison's voice, confident and authoritative, was discussing TechFlow's innovative approach to municipal database integration. Tyler Morrison's voice was also audible, though quieter and less certain. "Yes, sir. I've prepared a comprehensive overview of our security protocols and implementation methodology." I caught a glimpse of them through the glass conference room wall as they waited for their presentation slot. James Morrison looked every inch the successful CEO, all expensive suit and practice charm. Tyler Morrison looked nervous, clutching a folder of notes and checking his phone repeatedly. Maria and I left through a side exit, but I couldn't resist checking my email an hour later to see if any automated reports had arrived from TechFlow's systems. Nothing unusual. Whatever Tyler Morrison was presenting to the city review board, it wasn't requiring any actual interaction with the database systems he supposedly managed. That afternoon, I received a text message from Marcus Webb. "Heard TechFlow's presentation didn't go as smoothly as management hoped. Word is the review board asked some very specific technical questions that caught Tyler off guard." I didn't reply, but I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with Tyler's failure and everything to do with my own success. I'd built something meaningful, presented it professionally, and demonstrated the kind of technical leadership that TechFlow had discarded. 2 weeks later, Maria called with news that surprised no one. TechBridge had been awarded the contract for Austin Municipal Services Workforce Development Database project. They specifically mentioned your technical expertise and innovative approach, she said. "Sarah, this isn't just a contract. This is validation that meaningful work and technical excellence can coexist." The same day, Lisa Rodriguez sent me a brief email. "Heard about your contract with the city. Congratulations. Tyler Morrison's presentation apparently went about as well as you'd expect. TechFlow didn't make the final round of consideration." I never opened the flash drive Lisa had given me. 6 months later, I donated it to a local electronics recycling program, still sealed and unused. Instead, I spent my time building the workforce development database that would help thousands of refugees and immigrants find meaningful employment in Austin's tech sector. The system I created was more sophisticated, more secure, and more innovative than anything Tyler Morrison could have imagined, let alone implemented. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's creation. Sometimes the most powerful response to being erased isn't to erase someone else in return, but to build something so valuable that your worth becomes undeniable. I never returned to TechFlow, but I heard through professional networks that Tyler Morrison quietly left the company 6 months after losing the municipal contract. Apparently, without consulting support and with increasingly complex technical demands, his limitations became impossible to hide. James Morrison eventually hired an experienced database administrator to replace Tyler, paying significantly more than my original salary and publicly acknowledging the need for deep technical expertise in senior database roles. But by then, I was building systems that mattered, working with people who valued competence over connections, and proving every day that the best response to being underestimated is to exceed every expectation. The municipal workforce database went live 6 months ahead of schedule, under budget, and with security protocols that became a model for other cities across Texas. Tyler Morrison learned to maintain what others had built. I learned to build what others needed. The difference defined everything that came after. The Austin Workforce Development Database launched on a crisp January morning, exactly 18 months after I'd walked out of TechFlow Solutions carrying nothing but my personal belongings and my wounded pride. The launch event was held at the Austin Convention Center, the same venue where I'd attended countless tech conferences as a TechFlow employee, dreaming of building systems that would make a real difference in people's lives. Now I stood on the stage as the lead architect of a system that would revolutionize how refugees and immigrants accessed employment opportunities in Austin. The audience included city council members, nonprofit leaders, and representatives from major tech companies, who were eager to understand how the database worked and how they could integrate their hiring processes with the platform. Maria introduced me as the brilliant mind behind the most innovative workforce development platform in Texas. And for the first time in almost 2 years, I felt like the recognition matched the reality of my contributions. This wasn't courtesy, applause for a consultant brought in to fix someone else's mistakes. This was acknowledgement of something I'd conceived, designed, and built from the ground up. The demonstration went flawlessly. The database interface was intuitive and multilingual. The matching algorithms were sophisticated enough to identify non-obvious skill transfers, and the security protocols were robust enough to protect vulnerable populations while still providing useful analytics to employers and service providers. During the Q&A session, a representative from Dell Technologies asked about the technical architecture underlying the system's performance. I walked through the distributed database design, the load balancing strategies, and the real-time analytics processing that made the platform both fast and scalable. The technical questions kept coming, each one more complex than the last, and I answered them all with the confidence that comes from having built every component myself. After the presentation, I was approached by Dr. Patricia Vega, the city's chief information officer, who had been on the review board that selected TechBridge for the project. "Ms. Chen, I have to tell you something," she said. "When we were evaluating proposals last year, yours wasn't just technically superior. It was in a completely different league. Some of the other proposals seemed to fundamentally misunderstand the complexity of what we were trying to achieve." I knew she was referring to TechFlow's failed proposal, though she was too professional to mention them by name. "The technical interview process was particularly revealing," she continued. "We asked all the lead architects to walk us through their security protocols and data integration strategies. Your responses demonstrated not just theoretical knowledge, but the kind of deep practical understanding that comes from years of hands-on experience." She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. One of the other proposals was presented by someone who clearly didn't understand his own technical documentation. When we asked specific questions about implementation details, he kept deferring to consulting resources and specialized support teams. Tyler Morrison. She was describing Tyler Morrison's disastrous presentation without naming him directly. Dr. Vega, can I ask you something? How obvious was it that he didn't understand the systems he was proposing? She smiled grimly. Within the first 10 minutes, it was clear he was presenting someone else's work. The technical diagrams were sophisticated, but his explanations were superficial. When we asked about edge cases and error handling, he literally said he'd have to circle back with his technical team. In the image of Tyler Morrison standing in front of Austin's IT leadership, unable to explain the database architecture that bore his name, was both satisfying and professionally horrifying. He'd been exposed not just as incompetent, but as fraudulent, presenting technical work he didn't understand to people who absolutely did understand it. The real problem, Dr. Vega continued, was that his company's proposal was actually quite good from a technical standpoint. Someone with real expertise had obviously designed those systems, but the person presenting them clearly wasn't that someone. I thought about the consulting invoices Lisa had shown me months earlier, the expensive external expertise that TechFlow had been using to compensate for Tyler's limitations. Even with professional coaching and technical support, Tyler Morrison couldn't fake the kind of deep understanding that database architecture required. The launch event concluded with networking and celebrations, but my mind was already moving toward the future. The workforce development database was just the beginning. Austin Municipal Services had expressed interest in expanding the platform to handle other social services, and several nonprofits had inquired about licensing the technology for their own programs. More importantly, the project had established my reputation in Austin's tech community as someone who could deliver complex, innovative solutions on time and under budget. The phone calls and emails had been coming steadily for months. Job offers from major corporations, consulting opportunities with startups, speaking invitations from industry conferences. But what excited me most was an unexpected opportunity that had emerged from the workforce development project itself. One of the refugees whose placement had been facilitated by the database was Amara Hassan, a software engineer from Syria who had been driving for Uber while trying to break into Austin's tech scene. The database had matched her embedded systems experience with a position at a local robotics company. But our conversations during the placement process had revealed something more significant. Amara had been working on her own startup idea, a platform that would help skilled refugees monetize their expertise through remote consulting while they established themselves in new countries. She had the business vision and cultural understanding, but she needed a technical partner who could build the sophisticated matching and payment systems the platform would require. "Sarah," she said over coffee one afternoon, "I want to build something that changes how the world thinks about refugee talent. Not charity, not assistance, but recognition that displaced people often have incredible skills that global markets desperately need." The idea was compelling both technically and personally. After 18 months of building systems to help others find opportunities, I was ready to create my own opportunity, to build something that could scale globally and transform how businesses accessed international talent. "What would you need from a technical partner?" I asked. "Someone who understands complex database systems, international payment processing, and security protocols for handling sensitive personal information. Someone who can build platforms that work across different countries and regulatory environments." She was describing exactly the skill set I'd developed over years of database architecture and international system integration. "Also," she added, with a grin, "someone who understands what it feels like to have your professional value questioned and who's motivated to prove that competence speaks louder than connections." 3 months later, Amara and I incorporated Global Skills Bridge, a platform that would connect refugee professionals with companies worldwide. I served as Chief Technology Officer while continuing my consulting work with TechBridge and other nonprofits. The technical challenges were immense, building secure payment systems that worked across dozens of countries, creating skill assessment, algorithms that could evaluate expertise across different educational and professional systems, designing user interfaces that worked in multiple languages and cultural contexts. But the work felt like the culmination of everything I'd learned about database architecture, system integration, and user experience design. More importantly, it felt like building something that mattered, something that could create economic opportunities for talented people who'd been displaced by circumstances beyond their control. The platform's beta launch coincided with Austin's annual tech conference, the same event where I'd once represented TechFlow as their database expert. This time, I was presenting as the co-founder of a startup that was already generating international attention from both investors and corporate clients. During my presentation, I noticed several familiar faces in the audience. Marcus Webb was there, having left TechFlow 6 months earlier to join an artificial intelligence startup. Amanda Foster had moved to a project management role at a different company, finally escaping the administrative assistant track she'd been stuck in at TechFlow. Most surprising was seeing Kevin Walsh in the audience. TechFlow's former HR director looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as I discussed the importance of recognizing talent regardless of background or credentials. After the presentation, Kevin approached me near the exhibition booths. "Sarah, congratulations on your success. What you've built with the workforce development database and now this startup is really impressive." "Thank you, Kevin." He hesitated, clearly struggling with what he wanted to say next. "I wanted to apologize for how things ended at TechFlow. The decision to restructure your position was presented to me as a strategic business decision, but in hindsight, it was obviously a mistake." "What changed your mind?" "Tyler Morrison's performance, or lack thereof. After you left, it became clear that we'd replaced someone irreplaceable with someone unqualified. The consulting costs alone exceeded your entire annual salary, and that was just to maintain basic system functionality." Kevin explained that Tyler had struggled with increasingly complex technical challenges as TechFlow's client base grew, and their system requirements became more sophisticated. The municipal services proposal had been the final straw, exposing Tyler's limitations to potential clients and damaging TechFlow's reputation in Austin's competitive tech market. "What happened to Tyler?" "He resigned about 8 months ago." James tried to position it as Tyler pursuing other opportunities, but everyone knew he'd been essentially demoted to a junior analyst role before he left. His replacement is an experienced database administrator we hired from Oracle at a salary significantly higher than what you were making. The irony was perfect. TechFlow had paid premium consulting rates to compensate for Tyler's incompetence, then paid premium salary rates to replace him with someone more qualified than I'd been when they forced me out. "Kevin, can I ask you something? Why didn't anyone speak up when they were planning to replace me? Surely some people knew it was a bad decision." His face reddened with obvious embarrassment. "James Morrison is a strong personality, and he presented Tyler's hiring as a done deal rather than a proposal for discussion. When the CEO frames something as strategic family succession planning, it's difficult for middle management to object without seeming disloyal. Even when the strategic decision was obviously flawed? Especially then, James made it clear that questioning Tyler's qualifications was equivalent to questioning his judgment as CEO. Most of us chose job security over speaking up for what was right. I understood Kevin's position, even if I couldn't forgive it. Corporate politics often rewarded silence and punished integrity, creating environments where bad decisions were implemented simply because no one was willing to risk their career to oppose them. How's TechFlow doing now? Struggling. We lost several major clients after the municipal services proposal disaster, and our reputation in Austin's tech community has been damaged. James has been working with crisis management consultants to rebuild credibility, but it's an uphill battle. Kevin pulled out his phone and showed me TechFlow's latest employee reviews on Glassdoor. The ratings had dropped significantly over the past year, with multiple reviews mentioning nepotism, poor technical leadership, and management that values family connections over competence. Several senior employees have left for competitor companies, and recruiting has become much more difficult. Word travels fast in Austin's tech scene, and the Tyler Morrison situation has become something of a cautionary tale about the dangers of hiring based on relationships rather than qualifications. As Kevin walked away, I reflected on the broader implications of what had happened at TechFlow. Tyler Morrison's failure hadn't just damaged his own career, it had undermined the entire company's credibility and created lasting consequences for everyone who worked there. But the story wasn't really about Tyler Morrison's incompetence or James Morrison's nepotistic decision-making. It was about the broader systemic issues that allowed qualified professionals to be discarded in favor of connected mediocrity, and about the importance of building systems and relationships that valued competence over convenience. 6 months later, Global Skills Bridge had facilitated over 500 successful placements, connecting refugee professionals with companies across 4 continents. The platform had been featured in international media as an innovative approach to addressing both refugee economic integration and global skills shortages. More personally satisfying was the message I received from Fatima al-Rashid, a database administrator from Iraq who had been placed with a financial services company in Toronto through our platform. "Sarah, I wanted you to know that the opportunity you helped create has changed my family's life. For 2 years, I was driving rideshare and working in restaurants while my computer science degree and 10 years of database experience went unrecognized. Now I'm designing systems for international banking transactions, using skills I thought I'd never be able to use again." Fatima's message reminded me why I'd chosen creation over destruction when Lisa Rodriguez had offered me the information to expose Tyler Morrison's failures. Revenge might have provided temporary satisfaction, but building something meaningful had created lasting impact for hundreds of people who deserved better opportunities. The Workforce Development Database had processed over 3,000 successful job placements in its first year of operation. Global Skills Bridge was expanding into European markets, with pilot programs launching in Germany and the Netherlands. TechBridge Austin had received funding to replicate their model in other Texas cities. I'd built something that mattered, something that would continue creating opportunities long after Tyler Morrison's corporate failures were forgotten. On a warm spring evening, almost exactly 2 years after walking out of TechFlow Solutions, I was working late in Global Skills Bridge's offices when I received an unexpected email. The sender was James Morrison. "Sarah, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following your remarkable success with the Municipal Workforce Database and your startup venture. Your achievements reflect the kind of innovative thinking and technical excellence that TechFlow has always valued. I'm writing to explore whether you might be interested in returning to TechFlow in a senior leadership role. We're restructuring our technical team and would welcome the opportunity to discuss how your expertise could contribute to our future growth. The position would include significant autonomy, competitive compensation, and the chance to build a world-class database architecture team. I believe we could offer you the kind of technical challenges and professional recognition that match your demonstrated capabilities. Would you be available for a conversation about this opportunity?" I read the email twice, then leaned back in my chair and laughed. James Morrison was offering me the chance to return to the company that had discarded me, to fix the problems created by his nepotistic decision-making, to clean up the mess that Tyler Morrison had left behind. The offer was simultaneously insulting and validating. Insulting because it assumed I'd be interested in salvaging their mistakes after they'd demonstrated such poor judgment about my value. Validating because it confirmed that everything I'd built since leaving TechFlow had proven my worth beyond any reasonable doubt. I composed my response carefully. "James, thank you for reaching out and for your kind words about my recent projects. I'm flattered by your interest in having me return to TechFlow, but I must respectfully decline. Over the past 2 years, I've had the opportunity to build systems that directly impact people's lives, to work with organizations that value competence and integrity, and to create technologies that solve meaningful problems. These experiences have been professionally and personally fulfilling in ways that corporate database management never was. I wish TechFlow success in finding the technical leadership you need. I'm confident that with the right hiring priorities, focusing on qualifications rather than connections, you'll build the kind of team that can drive sustainable growth. Best regards, Sarah Chen, CTO, Global Skills Bridge. I sent the email and immediately felt a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I was seeking. James Morrison's offer represented everything I'd moved beyond: corporate politics, hierarchical thinking, and the assumption that traditional employment was the only path to professional success. 2 weeks later, I received a LinkedIn message from Tyler Morrison himself. The message was brief and surprisingly humble. Sarah, I wanted to reach out and apologize for how things went at TechFlow. I was young and overconfident, and I didn't understand the complexity of the systems you'd built or the expertise required to manage them properly. My failure in that role taught me valuable lessons about humility and the importance of respecting other people's work. I've spent the past year in a junior database analyst position, working under an experienced mentor and actually learning the skills I should have had before taking on senior responsibilities. I wanted you to know that I recognize the damage my incompetence caused, both to the company and to your career trajectory. Your success since leaving TechFlow has been inspiring to watch. The Workforce Development Platform and Global Skills Bridge represent exactly the kind of innovative, meaningful work that the tech industry should be focused on. I hope you'll accept my apology and my admiration for how you've turned a difficult situation into an opportunity to build something remarkable. Tyler's message was unexpectedly thoughtful and mature. The young man who had arrogantly assumed he could improve my database architecture had apparently learned something about both technology and humility during his professional humiliation. I replied briefly, Tyler, thank you for your message. I appreciate your honesty and your recognition of what happened. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them and growing. I wish you success in your continued professional development. The exchange reminded me that the real lesson of my TechFlow experience wasn't about corporate politics or nepotism, though those had certainly been factors. The deeper lesson was about the difference between having access to something and actually understanding it, between being handed authority and earning competence. Tyler Morrison had been given my job, my office, and my systems, but he'd never been given my knowledge, my experience, or my deep understanding of what made those systems work. That gap between position and competence had been impossible to bridge with external consulting or professional coaching. Meanwhile, I'd discovered that competence without position could be more valuable than position without competence. The databases I'd built for TechBridge and Austin Municipal Services were more sophisticated than anything I'd created at TechFlow. The technical challenges of Global Skills Bridge were more complex than any corporate project I'd ever managed. Most importantly, the work felt meaningful in ways that corporate success never had. Every successful job placement through the Workforce Development Database represented a life changed, a family stabilized, a talented person given the opportunity to contribute their skills to their new community. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I walked past the wall where we displayed photos from successful placements facilitated by our platforms. Hundreds of faces representing dozens of countries, professions, and stories of resilience and professional rebirth. Among them was a photo of Amara Hassan at her graduation from a Stanford executive education program, holding a certificate in entrepreneurial leadership. My co-founder had used the success of Global Skills Bridge to establish herself as a thought leader on refugee economic integration, speaking at international conferences and advising government agencies on immigration policy. Next to Amara's photo was one of Dr. Patricia Vega presenting the Austin Workforce Development Platform at a national conference on municipal innovation. The database we'd built was being studied by cities across the country as a model for efficient, effective social service delivery. At the end of the wall was a simple printout of an email from Maria at TechBridge. Sarah, because of the systems you built and the relationships you fostered, we've helped over 2,500 refugees and immigrants find meaningful employment in Austin. More importantly, you've shown us what's possible when technology is designed to serve human potential rather than corporate convenience. I turned off the lights and locked the office, walking out into the warm Austin evening with the satisfaction that comes from building something that matters. Tyler Morrison might have learned to maintain database systems, but I'd learned to create platforms that transformed lives. The difference between those two approaches to technology work had defined everything that came after my departure from TechFlow Solutions. Sometimes being replaced isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a better one. Sometimes the best response to being told you're not valuable enough is to build something so valuable that the statement becomes irrelevant. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Global Skills Bridge, the lead architect of Austin's workforce development platform, and the designer of database systems that have changed thousands of lives. I used to think my career was defined by the systems I maintained for other people. Now I know it's defined by the systems I build to serve human potential. Tyler Morrison tried to replace me but couldn't replace my knowledge. I didn't try to replace him. I just built something better than anything he could ever imagine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.